From the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah, this is Democracy Now!
The thing that led to the Panthers was what we were seeing on television every day: attack dogs, fire hoses, bombings.
We stand on the eve of a black revolution, brothers.
I was a cocktail waitress in a white strip club 2 years before I joined the Black Panther Party. How did that happen? The rage was in the streets. It was everywhere.
With groups around the country taking on issues of police brutality and accountability, we go back 50 years to another movement confronting the same issues. The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, is a new film that just premiered here at Sundance. One of the seminal moments was December 4th, 1969, when police gunned down party leader Fred Hampton asleep in his bed.
One of the most amazing things about Fred Hampton, besides the fact that he was 21 years old, and when he's making these speeches, and he's head of the Chicago branch of the Panthers, is one thing that he always talked about was racial unity. And one of the things that scared J. Edgar Hoover about Fred Hampton was he had the real ability to unite people.
Today, we spend the hour with award-winning director Stanley Nelson and Kathleen Cleaver, former communications secretary of the Black Panther Party, now a law professor at Emory University. The film also focuses on her late husband, Eldridge Cleaver, Huey P. Newton, and the FBI's attempts to destroy the party. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Park City, Utah. The White House is rejecting a call to return all of Guantanamo Bay to Cuba, a day after Cuban President Raul Castro said restoring Havana's control of the bay is a prerequisite for normalizing ties with the U.S. The United States has controlled the area of Cuba since 1903. The area contains the notorious U.S. prison as well as a large naval base. On Thursday, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest was questioned about the future of Guantanamo.
Is it the president's intention when he finally does close the Guantanamo facility to give back the actual territory to Cuba?
No.
No. So he wants to hang on to Guantanamo even after he empties the prison.
Yeah, the president does believe that the prison at Guantanamo Bay should be closed down. But the naval base is not something that we believe should be closed.
In other Cuba news, 8 Republican and Democratic U.S. senators have introduced legislation to repeal all restrictions on U.S. citizens' travel to Cuba. Democratic Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois co-sponsored the bill.
We tried it for 50 years. We said if we closed the door on Cuba, Cuba would change. We did not succeed in that policy. It's time for a new policy, a policy that we know is proven to work.
In Pakistan, at least 35 people have reportedly died after a bomb exploded during Friday prayers at a Shiite mosque in the South province of Sindh. Dozens were wounded. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, 3 American contractors were killed Thursday in a possible insider attack at a military base attached to Kabul's international airport. Earlier in the day, 16 Afghans, including 4 police officers, died when a suicide bomber targeted the funeral of a slain Afghan police commander. In other Afghan news, the U.S. military has begun classifying key information about U.S. efforts to train an Afghan security force and the cost of U.S.-funded infrastructure projects. The Egyptian wing of the Islamic State is claiming responsibility for a series of attacks that killed at least 27 security personnel in North Sinai province. The first attack targeted a military headquarters base and hotel, killing 25 and wounding at least 58, including 9 civilians. South Africa has granted parole to apartheid death squad leader Eugene de Kock. He was dubbed Primeval for his role in the torture and murder of scores of black South African activists in the 1980s and early 90s. He had been imprisoned since 1994, the year Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress came to power. On Capitol Hill, the Republican-led Senate has passed a bill to approve the Keystone XL oil pipeline. The Senate bill passed 62 to 36, 5 votes short of the number needed to overturn a potential veto by President Obama. In New York, the girlfriend of Akai Gurley says she plans to file a $50 million lawsuit against the New York Police Department. Gurley was shot dead by an officer in the dimly lit stairwell of a Brooklyn housing project in November. New York Police Commissioner William Bratton described the shooting as an accident, saying Gurley, who is African-American, was totally innocent. In academic news, Professor Stephen Salaita has filed a lawsuit against the University of Illinois and unnamed donors. Last year, the university withdrew a job offer to him after he posted tweets harshly critical of the Israeli assault on Gaza. A San Francisco public defender was arrested Tuesday inside a courthouse after she objected to city police officers questioning and photographing 2 suspects without their attorneys present. When the attorney, Jamie Tillotson, first objected, an undercover police officer threatened to arrest her for resisting arrest. Moments later, she was handcuffed. The incident was filmed and posted on YouTube. An activist from the anti-war group Code Pink attempted to perform a citizen's arrest of former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger when he arrived Thursday to testify on global security challenges at a Senate Armed Services Committee meeting. Kissinger served as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor during the Vietnam War under Presidents Nixon and Ford.
Committee will stand in recess until the Capitol Police
arrest Henry Kissinger for war. In the name of the people of Chile, in the name of the people of Vietnam, in the name of the people of East Timor,
You know what?
In the name of the people of Cambodia, in the name of the people of Laos.
Senator John McCain lashed out at the protesters and called on the Capitol Hill police to remove them.
I've been a member of this committee for many years, and I have never seen anything as disgraceful and outrageous and despicable as the last demonstration that just took place about, you're going to have to shut up or I'm going to have you arrested. Get out of here, you low-life scum.
30 minutes later, 2 more members of Code Pink interrupted Henry Kissinger's testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Yet as we look around the world, we encounter upheaval and conflict and chaos.
Code Pink calls for the arrest of Henry Kissinger for war crimes. Vietnam, from 1969 to 1973, Kissinger, working for Richard Nixon, oversaw the slaughter in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, which led to the deaths of millions of people. Many thousands more died from the effects of massive doses of Agent Orange and from unexploded bombs that covered the countryside.
Chile. Henry Kissinger was one of the principal architects of the coup in Chile on September 11, 1973, a coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende.
Thank you.
16 years of repression, torture.
The Code Pink protesters were taken out of the Senate hearing room, and Henry Kissinger continued with his testimony. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Park City, Utah, where the Sundance Film Festival is wrapping up. With groups around the country taking on issues of police brutality and accountability, we go back 50 years to another movement confronting the same issues. It was the 60s. As Black History Month is about to begin, we spend the hour with a remarkable new documentary that just premiered here called The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution.
The thing that led to the Panthers was what we were seeing on television every day: attack dogs, fire hoses, bombings.
We stand on the eve of a black revolution, brothers.
I was a cocktail waitress in a white strip club 2 years before I joined the Black Panther Party. How did that happen? The rage was in the streets. It was everywhere.
I say that Ronald Reagan is a punk, a sissy, and a coward. I challenge you to a duel.
Eldridge had this incredible ability to encapsulate a thought that stabbed right into the heart of the enemy. Now, was he insane? Yeah. That boy was crazy.
They were trying to change government as we know it through terrorist activity.
The State Assembly was in the midst of a heated debate when the young Negroes, armed with loaded rifles, shotguns, and pistols, marched into the Capitol.
Do you feel the nation is in trouble?
I think very definitely it is.
What is the answer?
The answer is vigorous law enforcement.
How about justice?
Justice is merely incidental to law and order.
The FBI saw the Panthers as a very, very threatening and violent revolutionary movement. They absolutely wanted this organization to be destroyed.
I felt absolutely free. I was a free Negro. In that little space I had, I was the king. And that's what I felt.
The great strength of the Black Panther Party was its ideals and its youthful vigor and enthusiasm. The great weakness of the party was its ideals and its youthful vigor and its enthusiasm. That sometimes can be very dangerous, especially when you're up against the United States government.
That's the trailer for the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. It's set to play in theaters and air on PBS later this year. But today we bring you the first look at this brand new film. It tells the history of Black Panthers through rare archival footage and interviews with party leaders, rank-and-file members, and even police and FBI informants. I sat down this week for an extended interview with one of its subjects, Kathleen Cleaver. She served as communications secretary of the Black Panther Party, is now a law professor at Emory University. And with Stanley Nelson, the film's award-winning director. Nelson's made several films about the civil rights movement, including Freedom Riders and Freedom Summer. I began by asking Stanley Nelson why he's now drawn to making a film about the Black Panther Party.
There's no one reason. I mean, one of the reasons was that I was a 15-year-old kid in New York City when the Panthers came into being in 1966. And so I was enamored of the Panthers. You know, I'm 16 in New York. All of a sudden, here are these people with leather jackets and berets and sunglasses and looking so cool and talking about revolution. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me. So I've always been fascinated by the Panthers. And then, you know, as a filmmaker, there's always more than one reason why you want to make a film. And as a filmmaker, you know, it's just such a wonderful story. And the people who were part of the story, the majority of them are still alive. They were only 20 years old or so at the time. And the Panthers were this media sensation. So there's an incredible amount of footage and still pictures, you know, to help construct this film. So all of those things came together, and I became interested in the Panther story. But I think also I've realized, you know, how the whole story reverberates with what's going on in the country today.
Well, the issue of police brutality was seminal to the Black Panthers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Black Panthers were started in Oakland, California, and it was 5 guys who started and said, you know, we have to do something about police brutality, which was heightened in Oakland. The Oakland Police Department was notorious. And so what they did, because there was a law in California that said you could carry a weapon, a loaded weapon, as long as it wasn't concealed. So they would drive around and follow the police. And when the police jumped out to make a stop, they would jump out behind the police and with their guns drawn and stand a little ways back and with their guns drawn and make sure that no brutality or violence occurred on the part of the police. And that's how the Panthers started. And from there, from these 5 or 6 guys, the movement just took off.
And explain who they were, those 5 or 6 guys.
They were college students. You know, this was Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, a couple of others. And they were college students, by and large, who just wanted to end the brutality that was in their lives with the police.
Kathleen Cleaver, how did you become a leader of the Black Panther Party?
I met Eldridge Cleaver, who came to a conference that SNCC had organized. He spoke at the conference. And when he went back to California, we were in love. And he wanted me to come and visit him. And I came to visit him in California. I came back to Atlanta. in August, and in October, Huey Newton was shot, and he was wounded, and he was facing the gas chamber if convicted of police murder. And Eldridge said, "You've got to come out here and help us." So I came back to California, I think it was in November, to work with the Panthers on that case. We got married in December.
You were born in Texas?
Yes, unfortunately.
How did you go from where you came from to be a member of the Black Panther Party?
Well, it's not that complex. My parents were very well educated. They met at the University of Michigan, and my father had been an activist. He'd been working on NAACP campaigns in Texas to win the right to vote. My mother had been protesting school segregation in Richmond, Virginia. So my parents were part of civil rights activism, and the way I was brought up, and I lived in Alabama, where the movement started, and I wanted to be in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee when I was in high school. I wanted to do what those students were doing, protesting segregation in the South. I couldn't get there, and finally in New York in 1966, about 2 weeks after they called for Black Power, I was able to get into SNCC, and I was thrilled. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. I could work in the Black Power movement. I could be in this revolution. That was it, and that was the beginning, and that's how I ended up in the Panthers, and that's how I continued. And
how did the Black Panthers compare to SNCC in terms of their goals, what they were responding to?
SNCC was on the decline. SNCC was actually collapsing. When I got there, I didn't know this, but SNCC was an organization that was dependent on funding from outside, and once it turned into a Black Power organization, and there were some other issues that happened, the funding dried up, and people, when I came in, you had to basically support yourself, no money. And so the organization was declining, it was getting smaller. When I got involved with the Black Panthers, it was a brand new group. And in fact, there were like 5 when I got there, because most of them were in Santa Rita prison after the visits to Sacramento. So it was a new organization. It was very, very exciting. And all their principles and the it was one of the first organizations based on the concept of Black Power that had been articulated in Mississippi and by SNCC. And so I got involved with them. In December, Eldridge and I got married, and I stayed out there and continued to work with the Panthers.
How did King, Dr. Martin Luther King, fit into this picture?
In what way? My picture or the country?
In your picture, and did he inspire you? How did the Black Panthers relate to him?
Everyone was inspired on some level by Martin Luther King. He was a tremendously decent and caring person. He was extremely intelligent, and he inspired a lot of Christians. Now, Eldridge made a comment in one of his speeches in Nashville. He said, "How about integrating some of this bloodshed?" That was one of the issues we had, that it was too much that Black people should absorb all the punishment, and we should be forgiving, and we should want to be peaceful in the face of murderous brutality in the middle of the Vietnam War. Well, that wasn't really a message that a lot of young people cared for. And so when the Black Panthers came out and started talking about self-defense, droves and droves of young people wanted to do that, and I thought that was the best. That's the best. We followed Robert Williams, and he said, if you are confronted by a racist who believes himself superior, then he has, and you're armed, he has to consider, does he want to risk his superior life to take your inferior life? And if you have a gun, you can put him in that position, and 9 times out of 10, he doesn't, and that's the end of the violence. So we believe self-defense was a way to put a reduction into violence, and I accept that.
Stanley Nelson, you've done a documentary in the Freedom Riders on Freedom Summer. So as you were doing those, the Black Panthers, you were clearly looking at, people are responding to as you go further on into the 60s. How do they compare in their strategy?
Well, I think it's a different strategy, but I think it was, it was a natural offshoot of some of those movements. So Freedom Riders leads into Freedom Summer. What happens at the end of Freedom Summer is at the Democratic National Convention, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party is defeated, in kind of an underhanded way by Lyndon Johnson and his forces. And so many of the people in SNCC at that time felt betrayed. They felt, we've done everything we can do. We've done it the right way. We've done everything. You've said you're on our side. And then when we get to the moment when we have to share power, you back out. So
this was to replace the all-white Mississippi Party with the integrated party.
Right, and Johnson, it's too long a story to tell right here, but Lyndon Johnson engineers kind of underhanded way to defeat them. And at that point, a lot of people left SNCC. And some left the movement altogether. But one of the things that happens at the end of Freedom Summer is there's a shot of Stokely Carmichael goes down to Alabama and gets on top of that truck or bus or whatever it is and starts yelling, "Black Power, Black Power, Black Power." And that's one of the first scenes in the Black Panthers' Vanguard of the Revolution, is Stokely Carmichael up on that vehicle yelling, "Black Power, Black Power, Black Power." So one thing really led to the other.
That's Stanley Nelson, the award-winning director of the new film, The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, and Kathleen Cleaver, who served as communications secretary of the Black Panther Party. We'll continue our conversation in a minute.
You got to give more power to the people. There's some people up there hogging everything. Telling lies, giving out advice about the people's money and things. And if they're gonna fall away, might as well be some to me. Yeah, they've seen and heard of, but never had misery. There are some people who are starving to death. Never knew, but only heard of. To eat. How can you think of love? You don't have time to care. So scribe you're guilty of. You got to give more power to the people. For God's sake. Why don't you give more power to the people? Cut just trying to see who's got the power to kill them all. When they run out of power, the world's gonna be a ghost. They know we're not satisfied.
For God's sake, give more power to the people by the Shy-Lights, a song featured in the documentary we're looking at today. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report, as we continue to look at a new film that's premiering here at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah, our last day broadcasting here. The film is called The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. I sat down with one of its subjects, Kathleen Cleaver, and former Black Panther communications secretary, now a law professor at Emory University, and the film's award-winning director, Stanley Nelson. I asked Nelson to describe one of the party's early landmark events, when co-founder Huey Newton led a march of armed Black Panthers to the California state capitol in Sacramento to protest the passage of an anti-gun law, the year 1967.
So the Panthers are patrolling the police. They're following the police around with guns, and a congressman I forget exactly his position, state legislator in Oakland says, okay, we can't have that. So he introduces a law to ban carrying weapons in the open. But the law is still in existence. So the Panthers go to Sacramento, California state capitol, and walk into the legislature with guns drawn. Now, it just so happens that Ronald Reagan, who was the governor then of California, is giving a speech right outside the legislature. So all the cameras are on Ronald Reagan, but all of a sudden...
And a group of school kids.
A group of school kids. So all these cameras are on Ronald Reagan, but all of a sudden they see all these black men with guns. So they turn from Ronald Reagan and start following these black men with guns into the legislature. And they actually get on the floor of the legislature with guns. And that starts the whole scene. Now, this becomes a huge news event where this little group that was in Oakland, in California, now is on the national news. So as we document in the film, African Americans all over the country are like, whoa, what is that? As one guy says, I wanted to be a part of that, whatever that was. So the Panthers catch on and become this kind of a national movement very, very quickly.
When I heard about Sacramento, I was like, damn, these brothers are bad. They're here up in Sacramento in the Capitol,
attacking? The boldness, the courageousness about it, the arrogance of it, that put a whole new face on things. I said, man, I want to be a part of this, whatever that is.
Yeah, I walked into the office and told them I wanted to join the Black Panther Party, and they kind of laughed. I didn't know that there were any other women, in the party at that time. But then I asked them, could I have a gun?
I was a student at Lincoln University outside Philly when I first heard about the Black Panther Party. I found my friend John Huggins, and I said, we need to leave this stupid campus. We have work to do. We got in John Huggins' little hoopty car. We drove across the country from New York, and when we got to the West Coast, we joined the Black Panther Party.
What we want, what we believe.
Point number one, we want freedom.
We want decent housing.
We want an education for our people. We want an immediate end to police brutality.
People join for all kinds of reasons, but the Panthers have a 10-point platform and program that really was sort of like the fundamental sort of organizing tool and orientation tool.
The civil rights movement was basically a Southern movement. So when you had an organization like the Panthers, who were taking on things like housing and welfare and health, that was stuff that people in the North could relate to and rally behind.
Our attack was not only against white supremacy, but it was also about capitalism. We actually thought that the way in which capitalism created a working class that was kept absolutely destitute, that was wrong.
So we took the position that in order for us to be free, that system had to be dismantled. We cannot be free in a system that had oppressed us in the first place. So you have to get rid of that system.
The clip from the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. And where were you then, Kathleen Cleaver?
I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I heard about it. And because I was working directly with Stokely Carmichael, and he had spent a lot of time working in California raising money, I was there, and we were very excited about the Black Panthers and this new energy and new organization. In fact, Stokely said, this is the first group that's implemented Black Power. So it's one of the earliest Black Power organizations. It's the Black Panther Party for self-defense.
One of the Black Panthers in the film, Jamal Joseph, said the civil rights movement was a Southern movement. The Black Panthers was urban. It was about health. It was about police brutality. It was about housing.
That's what the Panthers were. I mean, again, that was one of the reasons why they were so fascinating to me, back in 1966, 67, 68, because they were talking about issues that concerned me, in New York.
You worked on, Kathleen Cleaver, the Huey Newton campaign, right? Free Huey.
I came in when Huey was sitting in prison in Alameda County Jail facing the gas chamber. And the Panthers, there's 5 of us in a room saying we have to do something about Huey.
So explain what happened. How did he end up in jail?
There was an incident in October of 1967 when he was confronted by policemen, an Oakland policeman. I think he said, so we got the great Huey Newton. So there was a confrontation of 2 adolescent types, 26-year-old policeman, 26-year-old Black Panther. Huey wasn't armed, but he ended up taking a policeman's gun and ended up in shooting episode. 1 policeman was wounded, 1 was killed. Huey was wounded. He ends up in the hospital, and then he's arrested and charged with murdering a policeman and facing the gas chamber. So all that happened before I got there. I got there sometime in late November, and we're talking about how can we free Huey, what do we have to do? There's 5 of us, because all the other Panthers have been arrested for going to Sacramento. Eldridge Cleaver was the only person over 17, I think, in the room. Maybe Emory was with us, I'm not sure. I was 22, he was 31. So he was the spokesman. He became the spokesman, and I said, well, if you want to do something, why don't you go and have a demonstration at the courthouse to attract attention to his case, to get people to know about it? I don't want to march. but I'll march for Huey. And so we got young men and their girlfriends and students to come and have a demonstration when he first went to court. And I said, well, we have to notify the press. And I created a press release, and I had to identify who sent it. And I said, Kathleen Cleaver, Communications Secretary. And so from then on, we continued demonstrating protest. That movement, that Free Huey movement, radicalized the community, and all these people wanted to join and be Black Panthers. And that's when the name Self-Defense was dropped. It became the Black Panther Party, and it grew phenomenally all over the country, along with something called the Free Huey movement.
And ultimately, how did he get out?
By law. A court of appeals, I think it was Faye Stender was the attorney who worked on that particular appeal. The case was overturned. The conviction was overturned because there was some dispute about what had been said by one of the witnesses, whether the bus driver who testified had or had not seen his face. It was unclear, and that was a mistake, and therefore he was granted a new trial, but he got out on bail.
Let's talk about informants, about the FBI. Stanley Nelson, talk about what happened to the Black Panther Party and what J. Edgar Hoover did in particular.
Well, the Black Panther Party, as it rises and becomes, much more public, there's much more public attention on it. J. Edgar Hoover now, takes notice of the Panthers. J. Edgar Hoover had always had a problem with African Americans and any kind of quest for equality. We did a film almost 15 years ago called Marcus Garvey, Look for Me in the Whirlwind. And in 1923, the FBI agent who hounds Marcus Garvey out of the country is J. Edgar Hoover in 1923. So now we're, in like 1967. J. Hoover's still around, and he's head of the FBI. He pretty much has immunity. He can do whatever he wants. The Panthers come to his attention, and he just goes nuts, and he issues these memos that say, do anything you want to destroy the party. And the great thing about it is now those memos are all available. And so we use those memos in the film. It's not just conjecture. It's not these rumors about J. Edgar Hoover. It's his actual words where he says, do whatever you can, just destroy the party. And that was the directive of the FBI. COINTELPRO has 290 actions against black nationalist groups, what they call black nationalist groups. 245 of those 290 are against the Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers are riddled with informers because they have no security. All you had to do was go down to the office and say, I want to join the Black Panthers. And it was like, okay, fine, you can join. So they send agents. Every single office all across the country is riddled with informers, and the informers are doing things to set the Panthers up. So, as we have an FBI agent in the film, a former FBI agent, who talks about the fact that Wesley Swearingen, who talks about what the FBI would do was get one of their informants who was in the Panthers to arrange for the Panthers to get guns. Then they would go to the local police department and say, oh, those Panthers have guns, you better raid the office. And so also the Panthers, one of their directives for Panther members was don't let the police just come and break down your door. They have no right to just come and break down your door and start shooting. And you're in danger if they do come and break down your door. So the police would raid the Panthers based on the evidence of the FBI, the evidence that they had guns that the FBI had bought for them, and then the Panthers would shoot back, and it would become a shootout.
Talk about the SWAT team in Los Angeles. Wasn't this the first SWAT raid?
This was the creation in Los Angeles. Was the first Special Weapons and Tactics Squad ever was created in the Los Angeles Police Department, and it was first action was to take out the Black Panther office.
When was this?
1969 in December. It was the confrontation was 4 days after the murder in Chicago of Fred Hampton.
Well, let's talk about that first. The murder of Fred Hampton, which you document so well in the Black Panthers, this new documentary. I want to go to a clip, and maybe you can set it up for us, of Fred Hampton, who's actually espousing racial unity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the most amazing things about Fred Hampton, besides the fact that he was 21 years old, and when he's making these speeches, and he's head of the Chicago branch of the Panthers, is one thing that he always talked about was racial unity. And one of the things that scared J. Edgar Hoover about Fred Hampton was he had the real ability to unite people. Besides being an incredible speaker, incredibly bright, he had been the leader of the NAACP youth branch in Chicago. So he had those connections. He had connections in church. He had connections all over Chicago. And one of the things that he always said was, you know, we have to unite, all unite. That there's these problems that we have in common, and we need to unite on these. So, you know, he was building this coalition in Chicago that really scared J. Edgar Hoover.
This is a clip from the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. We're starting with Michael Klonsky. Explain who he was.
Michael Klonsky was head of Student for Democratic Society, SDS, which at that point was the largest student organization in the country. I think there were over 100,000 members of SDS on campuses all over the country.
And it goes from Klonsky to Fred Hampton.
We used to call the Panther Party the Vanguard of the movement, because they were out in the forefront. They were kind of setting the pathway. The things that we would face some repression for, they would face it 10 times as great. They were sacrificing oftentimes their lives in the struggle.
And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black, and I hate white people. I'm white, and I hate black people. I'm Latin American, and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly, and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other.
Fred Hampton here in Chicago was the main voice for racial unity.
The Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity.
We worked with organizations such as the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican street gang that had become political, and the Young Patriots, hillbillies, Appalachian white boys.
Introduce a man who's come over tonight from another part of town. He's fighting for some of the same causes we're fighting for.
Bob Lee, who was our deputy field marshal, had a meeting with them, and he was explaining why we should work together.
There's police brutality up here, there's rats and roaches, there's poverty up here. That's the first thing that we can unite on. That's the common thing we have, man. But I want you people to stick together, and I'll stick with Black Panthers, they'll stick with me, and I know they will.
The coalition that Fred was building in Chicago represented the Latinos, the poor whites, and poor blacks, but also because he had been in the NAACP, he had linkages with folks who were in the congregations, or church folks, and with working class folks. So Fred was building a broad-based coalition in Chicago, and that was the threat.
So that's a clip from the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. Talk about what happened in December of 1969, Kathleen Cleaver.
Well, Fred Hampton had been spied upon. The floor plan of his apartment had been given to the FBI, and the FBI created a death squad. They had certain individual policemen that they handpicked to take action that was to murder Fred Hampton. I mean, they went into his house shooting. They didn't knock. They came in at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody was asleep or half asleep. They came in shooting.
Now, one of the most amazing things about this, shooting, I can't even say shootout because the Panthers didn't fire a shot.
Which, of course, was not what the police said at the time.
Right, no, the police had their own version. But was that, this is an apartment with plasterboard walls. So the bullets are going through, all the way through the walls, through one room to the other, to the other, to the other. And there's a scene in there afterwards where they put sticks in the holes, and there's hundreds of sticks, in the holes. The police just went in there shooting, kicked the door. They actually, another Panther was killed. A kid named Mark Clark was killed, and he's shot through the door as he goes to answer the door. They kill him by shooting him through the door.
It's important to recognize the informant who's in there.
William O'Neill
had drugged Fred Hampton's orange juice. He didn't drink alcohol, so he put some drugs in his juice. He drank the juice, and he was drugged. He was falling asleep when they came. In fact, he was groggy. He could not wake up.
And he was laying next to his pregnant girlfriend.
Right. Yes.
Well, actually, she couldn't wake him up, and she actually lays on top of him and Fred Hampton to protect him. Fred Hampton is shot. She's wounded. Fred Hampton is wounded. They drag her out of the room, and then they shoot Fred Hampton in the head to kill him.
I heard a story that Fred Hampton was told shortly after Martin Luther King's death by a policeman, "You're next." Because by the COINTELPRO standards, they were making certain that no black leader could rise to be a messiah to unify the black masses. So King was their #1 target. Well, Martin Luther King was dead by 1968. December 1969, Fred Hampton is assassinated.
Right. I mean, they're actually, we have a couple of black policemen in the film who talk about it, but actually they give statements from back then about how horrible this was. But they're still alive, and they give statements in the film. And one of them told us that he had told Fred Hampton a couple of weeks before that, you should watch it because you're under fire. And they actually had plans to try to fly Fred Hampton to Canada. They had a plan to do that. But Fred had, like one more thing to do, one more thing to do, one more thing to do, and of course never made it out.
William O'Neill was his bodyguard, the agent, the informant for the FBI.
Right. He was Fred Hampton's bodyguard.
And he never had any suspicion?
No. People thought that William O'Neill was weird. That he was weird. He would come up with these plans to do crazy things. Let's get some hand grenades and do this. And they would be like, what are you talking about? And, these crazy things. And they thought he was strange. But nobody thought that he was an FBI informant. I mean, the thing that we have to understand is that at that point, the COINTELPRO program was completely secret. Nobody understood that the FBI was doing this crazy stuff.
Which stands, of course, for Counterintelligence Program.
Right. Now we we know. But back then, these are kids. Nobody's thinking. The FBI was a TV show on ABC, with Efren Zimbalist Jr. That was the FBI. Nobody even suspected that the FBI was doing this kind of crazy thing, much less murder.
That's Stanley Nelson, director of the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, and Kathleen Cleaver, former communications secretary for the Black Panther Party. The film is premiering here at Sundance. We'll continue with them in a minute.
Set free, we're saying, Bobby must be set free. Good God Almighty, said I damn is free. Say that he killed a brother, yeah, but this we know.
Free Bobby Now by The Lumpin', a song about jailed Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale. He would go on to run for mayor of Oakland. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from Park City, Utah, from the Sundance Film Festival as we continue to look at the brand new film premiering here called The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. As we continue my conversation with the film's award-winning director Stanley Nelson and Kathleen Cleaver, former Black Panther communications secretary, now a law professor at Emory University.
So, Kathleen Cleaver, what did you understand at the time? You certainly experienced the power, the surveillance of the FBI and your husband, Eldridge Cleaver.
Well, we thought they wanted to kill us, to eliminate us. That was the way that the evidence was going, that they would spy on us, that they would follow us, and that they wanted to eliminate our organization. What we didn't understand was this very insidious type of internal disputes they wanted to provoke, the conflict that they that they established between Huey Newton, who was in the United States in prison, and Eldridge Cleaver was in Algeria in exile, and all kinds of ways to turn people against each other. The assassination of Fred Hampton was a police operation, but the FBI funded it, and the FBI took credit for it. And so the manner in which the organization was being dismantled was very vicious and very violent, but we were determined to defend ourselves and not to let that happen.
And so explain then what happens a few days later in Los Angeles.
Well, in Los Angeles, the Panthers knew that the LAPD was planning to attack their office. They knew this because they had come by a few days before this, and Geronimo Pratt, who was the defense minister, said, look, that was a reconnaissance. They're going to come back. And so they were planning. They had sandbagged the office. They were planning for an assault on the office. They just didn't know when it would be. And in fact, the man who was on the guard on top of the roof, named Melvin Cotton Smith, was actually a police informant. And the police had told him that we're going to attack at a certain time. But guess what? They came a few hours early. And so that informant had to shoot at him. And there was several hours of shooting back and forth, back and forth. What was amazing, and it was considered a victory in the Black Panther Party, no one was killed. And the Panthers themselves, we cannot let this go down after what they did to Fred Hampton. So the spirit of Fred Hampton and the hostility to what had happened, the anger, the fury at what had done to Fred Hampton, fueled their determination not to let anything happen like that in L.A., and it didn't.
I should say, too, that you know, by this time, a bunch of the Panthers were Vietnam vets and had combat experience. So what they did was they put sand, you know, in between the walls. So they poured sand in between the walls. They had shooting ports. They had sandbagged up, you know, up the wall, so there were sandbags. So when the police attacked, the bullets were not getting through, by and large. They were not getting through. And so it became this 5-hour gun battle. And because the battle lasted 5 hours, the local news could get there. So the local news gets there. We're talking about 50 years ago. They get close enough to film a lot of it. So this gun battle, as it's ongoing, is being filmed.
All right, running down the street now, towards the building, so that we can see what's going on. There are police officers, look like Vietnam combat uniforms, automatic weapons, holding us back. Shotguns everywhere you can look.
I looked at the TV, Channel 5 had it on live. So I'm feeling like I can sneak in the back and join them some kind of way. I'm as crazy as I'm thinking.
Large group of people right now. They're putting the pressure on the police laws to stay so we can witness this.
When the police was trying to creep up on the side, you could see them, their reflection through the windows across the street. When they got close enough, they would tell me, okay, throw it now, and they throw the damn bomb out the window, and the police, you'd blow up, and they run back. We see this little cloud of smoke come, and it just, whoop, and that's the tear gas.
Back in those days, everybody smoked all the time. So what we did was we put the cigarette butts in our nose to filter out the fume.
We're looking right at the Panther headquarters. The devastation is astounding. The whole front of the building's been shot up, bullet holes all over the place, front doors smashed down, screens ripped out.
Guy got shot here, got shot in the arm, they missed my head here. I got buckshot all in me. They shot that room up, you know. So this arm was dead. So now I'm up there with just one arm, bleeding all down the face and stuff. But I'm alive.
I felt free. I felt absolutely free. I was a free Negro. You know, I was making my own rules. You couldn't get in, I couldn't get out. But in my space, I was the king. In that little space I had, I was the king. And that's what I felt. You understand? That's what I felt.
Kathleen Cleaver. So you mentioned that your husband, Eldridge Cleaver, was in Algeria. Take us back back to why he left this country.
Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. On April 6th, 1968, in Oakland, Eldridge Cleaver was leading a group of Black Panthers who wanted to retaliate against this killing of King. And their idea of retaliating was to go and find a police and shoot at the police, kill some police, because they had killed King. And there was a crew of maybe 7 or 8 Panthers, and when they came across the police, when they confronted the car, they all scattered and went in different places, and Eldridge and Bobby Hutton ended up in a basement of a house. David Hilliard was under a bed, some other people were in the bushes, and so the actual long-term shooting back and forth was between 2 Panthers, Eldridge Cleaver and Bobby Hutton, and then they did, after tear gas canisters started to burn in the basement, they decided to surrender, and Eldridge told Bobby Hutton, take off all your clothes, and they can't accuse you of having a weapon, and he only took off his shirt, he walked out with his hands up, and he was shot immediately. He was murdered.
How old was Bobby Hutton?
17.
He was the first member to join that group of 4 or 5 who formed the party. He was the first member of the party.
And there was no question he was murdered. There was a policeman who was willing to testify that he was murdered. I have his statement. Nothing was ever done. Eldridge was taken back to San Quentin, and he was a parolee, and so his parole was violated, so it looked like he had 4 more years independently of his charge. His lawyer, our lawyer Charles Gary, represented him in a hearing in Solano County, I believe. I'm not sure where's Vacaville, Northern California. Anyway, the judge, to everyone's surprise, because the adult authority that is in charge of parole did not present any evidence. All the evidence came from Eldridge and his attorney. He said, well, from what he's heard, he should be released, that he was imprisoned because of his eloquence. Because of his eloquence in representing the ideals of his organization. He was out on bail, $50,000 bail, in June of 1968, about 2 weeks before the murder of
Robert
Kennedy in Los Angeles. It was a very intense time. And so Eldridge was very public about not going back to prison. He said it publicly. He said it in speeches. He says, I'm not going back. And he was supposed to turn himself in November of 68 and a certain date, and he wasn't there. He didn't turn himself in. What he actually did, I found out many years later, was he went to Montreal. In Montreal, he got on a boat and went to Havana, disguised as a Cuban soldier. And while he was in Havana, a group of other hijackers and different people there created a little cluster of Black Panthers that did not exactly sit well with the Cuban authorities. And so at one point, Eldridge was required to be there, no publicity whatsoever. A news story comes out. I was actually on my way to Algeria to get a plane to go to Cuba to join him, and I'm in France, and the news story says Eldridge Cleaver's hiding in Cuba. I said, okay, front page story, this is a problem. So because of the revelation that he was there, and it was only allowed to be their secret, they said, okay, we're going to send you to Algeria to take the heat off of us, and then you can come back with your wife. So he went to Algeria because his hiding was exposed.
So you did join him in Algeria?
Ultimately, I got a message. I was on my way. Algeria is a stop for the Aeroflot, and that was how you could get to Havana by air. If you were in the United States, you had to go find another flight. And 45 minutes before I got on the plane to go to Algiers to get the Aeroflot, I got a message from a journalist, Lee Lockwood, who had said, I have a message from your husband. When you get to Algiers, do not try to come to Cuba. Stay in Algeria, that he's coming there. So I knew this very abruptly.
So how long did you live there with him?
4 years. We had 2 children while we were in Algiers. I was pregnant when I got there, so my son was born in July, about 5 weeks after I got there. And then my daughter was born in Pyongyang the following year.
Why Pyongyang?
Well, Eldridge and Bob Scheer had, Bob Scheer's the editor at Ramparts. They had created this U.S. People's Anti-Imperialist delegation to visit North Korea, Vietnam, and China. And he was taking this delegation, and he told the Koreans, I can't leave my wife here all this time. And so they said, oh, we will organize. And they invited, the Korean Women's Union invited me to come to North Korea.
So in that period, when he's in Algeria, the tension between him and Huey Newton, who's been released, is growing intense.
Eldridge was thrilled with Huey's release. He wanted him to come to Algeria, wanted him to see the international section of the Black Panther Party. He had a big portrait of Huey. He was just, and this would be the crowning achievement, that you can see our international section. On the other hand, in the United States, Huey was being fed all this information and misinformation about Eldridge and made to think that Eldridge was trying to undermine him and all these crazy types of things. And so Huey's believing that Eldridge wants him to come to Algeria so he can kill him. That is, he did believe this. And so he doesn't want to come. And so the proceedings of what's going on in the party and people being, when Geronimo, who had led that amazing defense of the Panthers against the LAPD, Geronimo was expelled and accused of being all sorts of things. That was a huge blow in the party and a lot of confusion. And then the New York 21, who questioned after they got out, some of them questioned what was being done with the money raised for their bail and legal fees, and questioned Huey Newton publicly in a underground paper statement. They got expelled. So, to make a long story short, Eldridge and Huey won a conversation on an AM show, and Eldridge condemned all these activities and said, you should get rid of David Hilliard, he's destroying the party. And then the show ended. After that, Huey Newton calls up and expels Eldridge from the party. Eldridge, me, and Don Cox. Anyone in Algeria. There were 3 Central Committee members in Algiers at the time. So he expelled us. And so that was the very traumatic period for everyone in the party, not just us. But, you know, people who had supported this organization, who revered Geronimo, they didn't understand, how can you be the ideal revolutionary one year and the next year be a CIA agent and a scumbag?
Geronimo Jijaga Pratt.
Yes.
Explain who he was.
Well, he was the defense minister, deputy defense minister in Los Angeles. He was also the hero who had made it possible for the defense of the office. And the newspaper just glorified him. He was a great hero. He was this and that. So a year later, he's expelled. So you know there's something wrong, but people didn't know what. And so it affected the whole
organization. Did you have any idea about the FBI at the time?
We didn't have the idea that they were constantly, every day, monitoring, pushing information. I've read their documents afterwards and saw how they were thrilled. They were so happy that the party was split. They figured they'd accomplished it. It was over once they expelled the Cleaver. And because people went underground, and then the Panthers began to fight each other. And there was retaliation and killings among Panthers in response to the situation that Huey had created with the expulsion. So the FBI was very much involved.
Thank you so much to both of you. Kathleen Cleaver, Stanley Nelson. The new documentary that has premiered to great acclaim here is called The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution.
That does it for today's show and our week of live broadcasts from the Sundance Film Festival, now in its 31st year here in Park City, Utah. To see or get a copy of a DVD of any of these shows, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. I'll be speaking today at Dolly's Bookstore on Main Street here in Park City at 1 p.m. It's a free event. Everyone's invited. You can visit our website for details. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Aaron Mate, Nermeen Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sam Alkoff, Hani Massoud, Ravi Karen, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield, Anna Ozbek, and Sam Riddell. Mike DeFilippo and Miguel Noguera are engineers. Special thanks to John Hamilton, Dennis Moynihan, Elizabeth Press, Brenda Murad, Chuck Skurich, Hugh Grant, Jessica Lee, David Pruden, Sharina Nadura. Our director is Becca Staley. Our general manager is Julie Crosby. And special thanks to our team here at Park City Television: Stanton Jones, Kevin Rapp, Evan Heath, Aaron Springston, Craig Van Stralen, Corey Reno, Yorivia Barrios, and Randy Eben. Again, our website, democracynow.org, will be in New York on Monday. If you can go to our website at Democracy Now!, you'll see transcripts, video, audio, podcasts, as well as columns and web exclusives. I'm Amy Goodman from Park City Television. Thanks so much for joining us.